Our next speaker is Tonye Segbedzi. And Tonye Segbedzi is a Senior Policy and Research Officer at the Australian Association of Gerontology. Tonye has 25 years in legal and policy roles in the corporate, public and not-for-profit sectors, including senior roles at Phillips Fox Lawyers, Victorian Legal Aid, Legal Services Board and the Department of Human Services and Volunteering Victoria. Welcome to the screen, Tonye.
Hello everyone. My name is Tonye Segbedzi and I'm from the Association of Gerontology, and I'm here today to give you a quick overview of our rapid evidence assessment on LGBTI ageing research on housing needs and preferences. I'm just going to try and share my screen with you, so just bear with me for a moment. So just before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from Dja Dja Wurrung country, and to acknowledge their elders past and present, and to note that their land was never ceded. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Dr. Sandra South, who co-wrote this paper with me. So the aims of our paper were to develop recommendations for policy improvements based on an analysis of the available LGBTI ageing research on housing needs, and to identify any key gaps in the evidence base. Our research was based on an AAG scoping review of LGBTI ageing research more broadly, which we did in October last year. And that review is available on our website, and I recommend it to you if you are looking for any research about LGBTI older people. It's very helpfully classified into categories, which make it easy for you to find what you need. It was a systematic search of academic and grey literature about LGBTI people and ageing or dementia. That review found around 53 publications on the issue of housing, and we then excluded some of them for relevant reasons. For example, they were very old or they weren't really about housing. And we manually analysed the full text of the remaining 29 publications. And here are some of the results that we came up with. Firstly, the research that we looked at was basically from the last 10 years, and we saw that there was a very slight increase in 2016 and 2017. Unfortunately, we only found 3 publications from Australia and 1 from New Zealand. The rest were from Europe and the United States. The main types of studies we found were opinion pieces and descriptive studies, and also studies that explored the relationships between particular issues. I guess as to be expected, most of the publications were about lesbian, gay and bisexual people. There were a few publications that claimed that they were about trans and gender diverse people and people living with intersex variations. But when we looked at them more closely, we found that there were actually very few such people included in their studies. The most commonly explored topics were research issues, which I'll talk a bit more about later, discrimination, and LGBTI specific housing needs. So some of our key learnings were that, as has been mentioned by Fiona, there's little or no LGBTI specific housing currently available, apart from in the United States. Although we are aware of 2 developments that are still in the planning stages in Australia. We found lots of evidence of discrimination in housing in Australia and in the United States, and there were higher levels of this discrimination for trans and gender diverse people and people of colour. In addition, and I think Fiona also mentioned this, there was a very widespread fear of discrimination. The majority of older LGBTI people want to live in gay-only or gay-friendly retirement housing. But there are diverse views about whether people prefer one type over the other. And in particular, there was some evidence that women would prefer women-only or lesbian-only accommodation above mainstream accommodation. And there were also some people that would prefer alternative types of housing styles beyond the traditional retirement housing, such as co-housing. As the Hague survey clearly found, affordability of housing is a major concern amongst older LGBTI people, And there are some groups within the rainbow communities that earn less than average. For example, lesbians, trans and gender diverse people, and people of colour. The research identified a range of needs that were LGBTI specific, and they included things like housing for singles, because there are a lot of older people who live alone. They talked about the critical need for housing that provides cultural and physical safety, particularly around trans and gender diverse people. They talked about the need for that housing to also be connected in some way to the wider LGBTI community. As Fiona has mentioned, there's a desperate need for rental housing options for older people who don't own their own homes. And there's a real need for support services in addition to bricks and mortar. There were some intersectional issues identified where there's some groups that have particular needs over and above the general rainbow communities, and that related to people, trans and gender diverse people, people of colour, people with disabilities, women in some cases, people living in rural and regional areas, and people with caregiving responsibilities. My colleague, Dr. Sandra South, conducted an assessment of the quality of the research evidence that we looked at. And overall, the quality of that evidence was low to very low due to issues of bias resulting from the research methods used and some of other study limitations, which are actually identified in many of the papers themselves. Nonetheless, both of us felt that the included studies provided really valuable insights into the needs and preferences and experiences of older LGBTI people. But for the future, there is a real need for higher quality research evidence with a low risk of bias that will show us what does and does not work to meet older people's housing needs. So based on the results and learnings, AAG made 15 additional recommendations, and that's over and above the general research recommendations that we'd made in our scoping review last year. I won't go through all of those due to restrictions on time, but you can read more about those recommendations in our paper. I just wanted to highlight and I guess reinforce what Fiona said, and that is that some of the key recommendations relate to the need for additional data on which research can be based, and that we need to invest in, so recommendation number 15, that we need the government to invest in high quality research on housing and homelessness for older LGBTI people, and that we need that research to focus specifically on Australian issues, and it needs to also focus on underrepresented groups, and they include trans and gender diverse people, people with intersex variations, people with disabilities, and people of colour. So it's my great pleasure now to officially launch this report and to let you know that you can read the full details of the report at our website. I've just given you our basic website address there because the specific link is quite long, but hopefully Ruben can put it up on the chat box for you. So our website is www.aag.asn.au. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tonye. And as someone who's read the report, that was a really great, overview of the content that's in there. And, I too lend my voice to the argument about data, and the report really goes through talking about the issues about when, there are surveys that have dealt with LGBTI QA plus people in Victoria, like the Victorian Population Survey, but when you drill down to the older people's data, it's just too small to be useful, and that's a recurring theme. I really encourage all the data nerds, which I say with such endearment as a data nerd myself, all the data nerds to really who are listening today, and all the people who ever write grants and the policy heads to really do a deep dive into the report and really look at that. I think they've covered it off really well, like what are the gaps and what are the issues. So thank you Tonye and Fiona for spending that time with us today to go through the report. And it is, I can guarantee you it is an easy read. It's a hard read content-wise, but it is an easily accessible read, which is fantastic. And now I have the pleasure of introducing a lived experience speaker and who's with us today. And his name is Buzz Rainbow Wolf. And it's an absolute pleasure to bring you to the screen, Buzz. And I'd just like to say there's 115 people tuned in today, and it's a fantastic showing. And I look forward to being able to hand over to you, Buzz, to bring that lived experience to today's launch.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, my name's Buzz. I'm currently living in the West Wimmera Shire in Victoria. I am currently in the process of trying to house myself. I'm in the process of being an owner builder and building myself a house. I've got my house to pass lockup, but I'm basically struggling to push on from there. Financially, I've had to take out a mortgage, which I've put into my house build. I'm on a disability pension, so my funds are actually quite limited, and I've basically used my superannuation to buy my land originally, and so all my funds basically over the last 3 years have gone into my house build, and so my experience of being at risk, I guess, of homelessness in terms of my current situation is that unless I can actually complete my build, I don't have officially somewhere to live. So I have to get my house up to a certain standard to get an occupancy certificate from the building surveyor, from the council, and I'm hoping I can do that, but it's quite a struggle. And some of the issues that I've had to deal with is that when I first got my land, I was living in a government housing in South Australia, and basically when I put a caravan on my property, which I bought with my disability super payout, the Office of Housing SA, they basically wanted to evict me, and so they basically encouraged me to leave. So otherwise I would have had a black mark on my name. So with the housing cooperative. So basically I was kind of encouraged to leave and live in my caravan, which had no power, no water. So I had to basically deal with that situation. So and that was quite frustrating. I was getting mixed messages from the council initially that they were okay with me doing that, and then I received a notification that wasn't okay, that they had policies and bylaws in place that I couldn't live on my land even though I owned it. So and so I was kind of caught in this kind of limbo situation, and it wasn't really good for my mental health and or my physical health really, and so luckily I was seeing someone at the time, so I was able to spend a bit of time at their place. So and I sort of basically was able to through a legal settlement to pursue building a house on my land, and so and I was able to start that journey off. But that was really difficult being a pensioner, and the cost of building a house is incredibly sort of difficult, because you have to estimate a certain cost of works, and then my cost of works blew out by about 40,000, and that's just continued to go up. So initially I owned my land outright, and I had to basically give my certificate of title back to the bank to get a small loan, which was about 25,000, to boost my capacity to to complete my build. So I haven't been able to do that. I still don't have running water. I still don't have electricity. I am sort of in the later stages of my house build, but I'm not quite there yet. And I don't have any any financial resources anymore, or the capacity to take out further loans. I just can't as a pensioner. It's the banks just won't do that, and I'm not eligible for any assistance, like even the first homeowner grant, which a person would, a new home builder would be able to instantly access. As an owner builder, I can't access that until my build is complete and I've got my occupancy certificate. And I've had issues with the State Revenue Office trying to see if they would, with the COVID situation, give me a bit of leeway there, but they're not willing to do that. So there's really no help from the government. As a pensioner, as a low income person struggling to house yourself, there's no support or assistance from the government really. And as an owner builder, even though you invest all your resources, all your money into this build, far more than what a new homeowner generally does, who goes to say like a builder, they get the first homeowner grant, the $20,000 in regional Victoria, and they get that support. But as an owner builder, you don't. So so that's been quite difficult to deal with. And if I can get my house up to a certain standard, and I'm not far off that, but there's still a few things that are really challenging, but I'm just plugging away and doing the best I can. So I'm hoping that I can house myself at some stage in the future, but I don't know. It could all go badly, and and then I could be in a difficult situation. As I said, because while I'm building, the council will let me stay on the land, and the building surveyor has approved that, so that's okay. If I wasn't building, I wouldn't be able to stay there. So, and yet, I own the land. That's where I live. That's where, that's where my driver's license is. That's where my Centrelink is. That's where, that's my home. So, and I'm very tied to my land. I'm trying to build a permaculture type farm, and I wanted to create a space that I could share with other HIV positive gay men who were at risk of needing somewhere to live. So, or perhaps some respite in the country. So I'm hoping that in the future that I will have that space to do that. So I guess that's essentially my my situation, and I participated in the report because I see the need to support other LGBTIQ elders, and I have seen the consequences in my own life with other people, friends, lovers, etc., in the past that have had challenges with housing themselves and stuff, or been at risk. So, and yeah, it's really important what HAG have done and this report, and I hope that some really good policy development is taken on board by the government to create a better situation going forward. I am really concerned about the budget from the government. The federal government's really not giving anything in terms of support for people with housing and homelessness, and they tend to, and the trend seems to be to withdraw funding. So that's federally, and that's really disappointing. So anyway, that's about all I can really say. But thank you for letting me share my story. Thank you.
Thanks, Buzz. I think it's really, I think your story is really, I know people will be really able to relate to your story, and you have such an honourable mission of what you want to do with your property. And I could see lots of people in the chat were wishing you good luck with that and cheering you
Yeah,
up.
I saw that. That's great. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of people I know that have had conversations about where we want to be when we're older, and a lot of us want to be in community and around like-minded people and have our family, our chosen family around us. So
exactly.
I think like a lot of us could relate to your mission that you have ahead of you, and all the best with that.
Well, thank you.